Well, the High Court in Pretoria today has ordered that former President Jacob Zuma must pay back nearly 28.9 million rand. Those are state funds that were spent on his legal fees in the long-standing arms deal case. For more on this, let's speak to legal analyst and attorney in practice, Advocate Modidima Mannya. A very good evening to you, sir. Good to have you on the program. So, finally then, the court has reached its conclusion, but has it come to a fair and reasonable conclusion?
Yes, good evening and good evening to your viewers. Look, what may be fair and reasonable to me may not be fair and reasonable to Mr. Zuma. But I think the judgment, as you see it, has got reasons. And one of the key issues in this matter is that when these fees, the decision to cover his legal fees was made, it was also based on the basis of his undertaking to refund the money if he is found guilty. And I think we have had a similar situation with the late former police commissioner, Jackie Silive. There was a similar arrangement. But I think the reality is, in law, it was grossly irregular and unlawful for the state attorney to incur such expenditure in respect of an individual.
And the contention from the former president has always been that he should not be the one bearing the financial consequences of that irregular decision. He said, well, the people who gave the green light, the permission for this money to be paid over, spent on his legal fees, should have been to blame. Is that unreasonable?
Well, it's a sad proposition, particularly coming from somebody who was a head of state. I mean, the various officials operate under him as the overall chief executive of the republic. So you can imagine if every single civil servant here has got this type of arrangement and he says, I blame the clerk who processed the payment or that kind of thing. I think it's a sad proposition. It doesn't make sense at all.
And I haven't seen any sort of official feedback. When we did reach out, when our team reached out to get a response from the Zuma camp, we were told that they would basically be consulting, perhaps in the hours ahead or even days ahead, with his legal team. But based on what we've heard in terms of the reasoning of the court today, Advocate, is this a case that he would easily win if he approached another court?
Well, I'm very skeptical. I think the one issue, there are two important issues here. The one issue is that there was never a basis, and there will never be a basis unless there is a statute that provides for that, for individuals, even in the private sector, to have their employers pay for their alleged criminal conduct. I think that would be a complete abuse of state resources or the company's resources. The position is different in civil matters where the employer is generally held responsible for the actions of its employees or its agent. In this particular instances, the matter related to the individual conduct of Mr. Zuma in his personal capacity. Naturally, the state is the first opponent to criminal conduct, and that is why they pass laws to criminalize it. I will find it strange if the government and the parliament passes law to declare certain conduct criminal, but then they come back and say we must protect the very same people who breach those laws.
It does raise serious questions, though, does it not, Advocate Mannya, about the systems within government itself, that ultimately someone who was not due this sort of legal backing or cover from the state attorney's office did manage to rack up a bill of more than 28 million rand before the taps were turned off?
Well, Tembekile, General Masemola said something in his evidence at the Madanga Commission. He spoke about an issue called career limiting. And there are systems in government, there are policies, there are laws, but there is generally undue pressure being put on administrators to do even things that they know they are not supposed to do. But as you know, and there's a history in this government, that people who say no to wrongdoing, they get punished. So I suppose sometimes government officials do find creative ways to cover their career, but at the same time to ensure that they don't offend the principals. I mean, you can understand that it would have been very heavy on the state attorney to say no to the president, especially in the context in which the situation existed at the time. So I think it was always going to be a problem for any official to say no.
And do you find it interesting at all that the court today went as far as saying that it's not just the 28 million rand that former President Zuma must pay back, but the interest is also part of what he should settle?
Yes, remember this is a debt to the state, and Mr. Zuma himself have said so. So every debt attracts interest generally. I mean, if you were to get a court order now suing Bongi when please don't try it for 50 rand, if she doesn't pay, it will attract interest.
I've just checked with her. She can afford 50 rand, so thankfully we're sorted. I want to ask you then about the consequences of this, because the former president, unless something happens legally, has about 60 days, 2 months or so, to come up with this 28 million rand plus interest paid back to the state attorney. If not, he will lose both movable and immovable assets, including his pension. Looking at the odds right now, do you think it's the sort of money he might be able to raise quickly? Is there anything that he can do legally to settle it, maybe in installments? I don't know.
Yes, well, he can make arrangements to pay the money off in installments. But the normal position is that when you have a judgment that you owe money and you have to pay somebody, that person is entitled to issue a writ of execution, attach your bank accounts, attach your immovable assets, attach even your movable assets if your immovable assets cannot meet that. But I think this is going to be quite interesting because, you know, the pension we are talking about is actually a presidential salary because, as you know, the president and judges earn a salary for life until they pass on, and that is what is referred to as a pension. And it will be very interesting to see, because there are limits to how much you can attach on a person's pension. But I must also say that it is also possible that Mr. Zuma might decide to appeal this judgment. Of course, he will have to start by applying for leave to appeal. If it's declined, he will have to petition the Supreme Court of Appeal. And the matter might just spend quite a nice holiday in court for a while before any action can be taken. But separately, assuming that Mr. Zuma is only living on the salary of a president, what we call a pension, it is clear that it will take quite a while, even if the whole amount is taken, before you get the 28 million, including interest. Because remember, if they were to take the whole 2 million plus this year, there will still be 26 million plus interest. So to a very great extent, unless it's paid in one installment plus interest, it will continue to increase.
And for a man of his advanced age, could someone else in his family become liable, I wonder, if he wouldn't be able to pay?
No, because that person is not the person in respect of whom the judgment was taken.
Good to have your time. Advocate Modidima Mannya, thank you so much for speaking to us on the SABC this evening about the judgment out of the High Court today, confirming that former President Jacob Zuma must pay back more than 28 million rand spent on his legal fees by the State Attorney's Office.